Yes, that's true. You push this one.
Welcome to the Rye-Town Park Commission meeting of Tuesday, September 19th, 2017. Please rise, and would Luke Glockenberg lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Debbie, roll call, please.
Commissioner Killian,
Yes.
Commissioner Falanka,
Yes.
Commissioner Rosenberg,
Yes.
President Zuckerman.
Yes, thank you. Our first item is approval of the Park Commission minutes of August 15th, 2017. If there are no additions or amendments, may I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Aye.
None opposed. May I have a motion and a second to, for resolution to change the time, date, and location of the October meeting of the commission to 7 p.m. on October 25th at Rye City Hall?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Thank you. Is Navy here? No, she's not here yet. Then let's skip the park manager report until she gets here so we can talk about the financials. And we have a presentation and a discussion regarding the Greenwich Point Conservancy. Chris Franco, that's you. While Chris is going up, Chris is the president, I believe that's your title, and or executive director. We'll all remember that the Capstone Project had pointed out that there are several conservancies that operate parks, and the closest and possibly one of the more successful is the Greenwich Point Conservancy, which is right up the street from us practically. It didn't take you long to get here, right, Chris?
Did not.
Okay. And so we asked Chris to come here and to make a short presentation so the public can see how another park that is similar in many ways to Rye-Town Park raises funds and operates. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Gary, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I wanted to mention, I noticed that next door is the convalescent home that's on the Harkness property. Is the Arbors a convalescent home?
No.
Oh, it's not. But my point, I know that it was a Harkness property, and I wanted to mention
Long time
that,
ago. Yeah,
yeah.
that was up at what is now Belfair. That was the Harkness Hospital at that time.
Oh, I see.
On
Well,
what is now
I
the
wanted
Belfair
to,
That's
I
there,
wanted
it's
to just
called Harkness
mention
Park.
that property, that Harkness,
That's Harkness Park right there.
Maybe I'm wrong on the,
I'm pretty sure it's Harkness Park next door.
Harkness Park is where
Harkness
the
Park.
tennis courts are.
Correct.
Right, right.
But my point in raising it is that,
Pardon me,
The
I was
town
wrong.
of- the
It
town
was
of-
High Point Hospital, not Harkness Hospital.
yeah.
Both with an H. I apologize.
But I just wanted to sort of note, because I think it's interesting that Greenwich Point would not exist today but for Harkness Park. And the reason is that Greenwich Point, it's a 147-acre peninsula, and it used to be the private estate of Mr. and Mrs. J. Kennedy Todd. And Mr. Todd was a benefactor of the New York Presbyterian Hospital in the city, which is now part of Columbia University. And when he died in 1925, he left the property, the 147-acre property that's now Greenwich Point, to the New York Presbyterian Hospital to become ultimately a convalescent home. But it was subject to Mrs. Todd using the property for her lifetime. And Mrs. Todd didn't pass until 1939. And in the meantime, the Harkness family donated this property for a convalescent home. So by the time Mrs. Todd passed in 1939, the hospital didn't need that property for a convalescent home. So the town of Greenwich ended up purchasing it in 1940-ish, 1942. So we're very thankful that we have Greenwich Point in Greenwich, and there's a connection with the property just immediately adjacent. It's a little bit of history.
Thank you for the history lesson. That's great.
So I am the president of the Greenwich Point Conservancy, and we are a stewardship organization. We're basically an all-volunteer stewardship organization. We do have a single paid administrator that works for us. And we were founded about 13 or 14 years ago. And we were inspired I'm one of the founders of the organization and have been the president since its inception. And we were really inspired to form our organization after a visit that my wife and I had in New York City when our now 16-year-old son was in a stroller, and we were walking around Central Park waiting for our older son who was taking a test, and we were just amazed and impressed by what a beautiful job the Central Park Conservancy had done over a long period of time in New York City. Over 25 years, we subsequently learned it took them to restore all of the historic buildings there, and a few of us had long noticed that there were some great historical buildings on Greenwich Point that had really become very run down. And in fact, the town was planning to demolish several of them, including the Innis Arden Cottage, which is the one that you see presently, on the screen. And that was built in, well, the estate, Mr. and Mrs. Todd lived there from the late 1880s until Mrs. Todd passed in 1939, and there were and there are still some beautiful estate buildings on campus, on the campus, if you want to call the park a campus. So in any case, we were inspired and thought, gee, it might take us 20 years, to do the same thing, but over time, we can restore these historic buildings and help repurpose them so that they would be useful to the town for town facilities and services. The model that the Central Park Conservancy had is a little bit different than ours because they actually signed a contract with the City of New York to actually manage the park, and that was not our model. Our model was to act as a stewardship organization where we would raise private funds, and then we would actually do the work of the restoration, and then when the work is done, we sort of gift back, if you will, the finished product to the town. So we founded our organization, got 501c3 status so that we could take donations that would be tax exempt to the donors. And then we started doing two things. We started researching the buildings and we started fundraising. And in terms of fundraising, we early on created an event that has become an annual event in town, which we call the Beach Ball. It's held down at the beach, and it's one of those big gala kind of fundraisers that has become very, very popular. I think it's probably the most popular benefit in Greenwich these days, and we always sell out, which is about 600 people, because that's the capacity, and we usually raise about $250,000, per year. Sometimes we've raised a little bit more, and we try to keep the event accessible to folks. We could probably raise more if we raised prices, if we tried to make it more elite, if you will, but that really hasn't been our focus. Our focus is to have it be a really nice event, a beautiful event, but to also have it be one that's very accessible to folks in town so that everybody feels welcome if they want to come. And we usually make a bunch of money at the event on having a live auction. I think we usually make about 100,000 of the 250 on the live auction that we have, and we've been doing that each and every year. So we identified early on the first project that we were going to do as right at the entrance to the gate, which is the Innis Arden Cottage. This is a picture of the cottage that was taken in 1907. It was built in 1903. It was actually a great, interesting building because it was designed by a female architect, and her name was Catherine C. Budd, and she was the first female architect to be admitted to the New York AIA, which is the professional organization of architects. And the building is a great building, and it's right on the beach, and it's right on the cove as well. And but over time, it had gotten very run down. Here's a photo that was taken around 1990, and it looks pretty good on the outside. On the inside, the ceilings were collapsing, the windows were broken, the plaster was peeling. It was really very, very run down. And the town had used it as what they called lockers for years, but they were really more like little bathhouse rooms because it had been all divided up into little cubbies. And
We have a building like that at Rye Town Park. Yes.
do you?
The tower building, yes.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because none of us really knew what this building was originally. It was called, people in town called it the Queen Anne Cottage, but it wasn't Queen Anne architecture. It turns out that the Todds used to have a big grand house on the other side of the point, which was a cottage in the sense that Newport Beach has cottages. They were big mansions that were called cottages at the time that were owned by wealthy people. And somehow the name had become attached to this cottage, but it was actually called the Innis Arden Cottage. The estate was called Innis Arden. And we were able, through our research, to find like those photos. I showed you one just prior to this that was taken in 1907. And we actually found photos that were at the George Eastman archive that had just gone digital. And we found photos of the exterior of the building taken shortly after it was built, and we used those to do the restoration. Here's a picture that was taken just this past summer. There's a gentleman in town who drives around with a horse and buggy, and it was funny because that's probably what it looked like when it was first, that's probably what it looked like when it was first built, but that was just taken this summer. The inside of the building, which had also been all, cut up, had a big grand hall that was done in paneling, and it was all still there. It had just been buried underneath, all sorts of layers that had been added over the years. So we were able to take that off and restore it, and restore the fireplaces and the original floors and all. I don't know, this is kind of hard to see, but that's a before and after picture of one of the rooms in the gallery. The mantle had disappeared. As I said, the ceiling was coming in. So we just were able to do a very thorough restoration. And in connection with doing that, though, we had to figure out what the building was going to be used for. So the director of Parks and Rec convened a working group that had constituent organizations that were interested in the point, like our organization, Friends of Greenwich Point, the Greenwich Shellfish Commission, the Bruce Museum, just different organizations that had an interest, and sort of we collectively developed a consensus that the building should be used for environmental education. So the building now has lecture space. It has the Bruce Museum operates the Seaside Center there, which has got aquarium and maritime learning. It's open and staffed by the museum during the summer months. UConn also has an oceanographic center upstairs. The Greenwich Point Conservancy's office is in it. So and it's available to be reserved and booked for meetings and events by cultural and civic organizations. It's not available to be booked by private parties for birthday parties and things of that nature. Many people would like to do that because of its beautiful location, but it was determined that it would be best used for organizations in town. So it's been a very successful project. And then our second project was just beyond the Innis Arden Cottage, and there was what was originally an old barn that was built in 1887 right at the entrance to the point. This picture was taken in 1945 when the town first bought the property, and the building was still in pretty good condition at that point. By the 1980s, it was kind of boarded up. They were running the food concession out of it, and it had sort of lost its character, but it was still functioning to a certain extent. And then it took a big hit during Hurricane Sandy. It was pretty badly damaged. And at this point, the town had even talked about tearing it down. But we thought that would be a mistake. It was the oldest building at the point. It had the food concession in it. We thought we could restore it and keep the food concession in it. It also has a beautiful view, so we built a terrace overlooking the beach. And here's what it looks like today. This is actually a picture taken from the back deck of the Innis Arden Cottage. And you look across and you can see the old barn, you can see the deck, and then the beach beyond it. And so we call it the Sue H. Baker Pavilion. It was named for one of our founding board members. And it's got the food concession on one side, it's got bathrooms on the other side. It's sort of open front to back, and it sits over the water. This is a picture of the front, and you can see that those columns with the original that were stacked boulders, those were all original, and thankfully did not come down during Hurricane Sandy. And here you can just see how the pavilion and the deck is over the water. I would recommend, I think it would be great if you all had an organization like ourselves for your park, because one of the things that we've been able to do is to be creative in terms of how we envision these projects. Of course, we have to be collaborative with the town, because ultimately it's the town-owned properties, and the town is going to have to maintain these properties and assure that they're functioning well for the community. But we have been able to do the work, I think, to a higher level than the town would otherwise because of budget, to be quite frank. We spent about $1.5 million on the restoration of the Innis Arden Cottage, and we spent about $1 million on the restoration of the old barn. And then we also have done some projects between the two in terms of restoring gardens and the like for maybe another $500,000. So we've raised and spent about $3 million on behalf of the
Chris,
town.
how much, that's the money you've spent. Has the town also spent money on the projects, or it's all private?
No, we've actually fully funded the projects with private money. However, the town has to maintain them going forward. And so part of the process has been that we've provided these to the town as gifts, and so the gifts have had to be presented to the RTM and accepted by the RTM. And the town has had a lot of input into...
Those that don't know what RTM is, Representative Town Meeting.
Yes, the Representative Town Meeting in Greenwich, which is our sort of governing body. And that we've had to do a fair amount of work in terms of making sure that these because of their location. The good thing about historic buildings is that there are exemptions from the FEMA regs. So it's actually quite a gift that we have historic buildings at Greenwich Point. And I would say it's probably a gift that you have historic buildings too, because nowadays you have to build everything way up. And if you have to raise things, then it's very difficult for it to be ADA accessible. So it creates a lot of problems. So if you have historic buildings, they are eligible for an exemption from the FEMA regs. And so it gives flexibility to provide needed services within historic buildings. You get really two benefits. You get to have beautiful, restored historic buildings, which are, I think, very much appreciated by the community. And you also get to have needed services that are basically accessible to people because they can be built in what would otherwise be a flood zone. The way that we've done the work was fairly unique too. The Innis Arden Cottage, our first project, we did it in 3 phases. The first thing we did was the roof. And we did it in 3 phases really because we didn't have the money to do the whole project at one time. So we thought the first thing that we should do is put a roof on, because there was a lot of water infiltration, and we thought it was damaging the building, so we wanted to get the roof on. And then the second phase that we did was the exterior of the building, to finish the exterior, and then the third phase was the interior and the services. And because it was an environmental education center, we put in geothermal heating and cooling. We put a wind turbine, a very attractive wind turbine on the building to show folks that you can generate electricity that way. We have solar panels. So we tried to make it a teaching and learning experience. We tried to integrate that with the historic architecture.
Where are the historic panels on the historic, where are the solar panels on the historic roof?
They are, there's sort of a shed on the side of the building, and they're on that. And then the wind turbine is actually really beautiful because we built a stone column, and it's sort of a double helix wind turbine, so it actually looks like a piece of sculpture. People think it's sculpture, but it's actually generating electricity, and we power a camera from that that's on an osprey nest out in the cove. So again, we're sort of reinforcing that there are these green technologies that can be used. So it's really, again, it's more of a teaching thing. But what was novel after the first phase, for the first phase, the roof, we actually gave the money to the town to do the work, and we were not happy with the work that was done. We thought it was too expensive, and we thought that the quality of the work wasn't good enough. So when it came time to do the second phase, we said we would like to do the work. We would like to contract the work and then present it to the town as a completed gift. And this got everybody very confused about how that might happen. But we actually were able to figure out a pretty interesting and novel approach that was developed through the legal department at the town. So what ended up happening was the town gave the Greenwich Point Conservancy a 1-year license agreement where we had possession of the building for the specific purpose of doing the approved work for a defined period of time. And then we did the work, and then when the work was done, which was before the end of the term of the license, we presented the building back to the town. So it was a way for us to do the work on a town building, and we've been able to be very efficient about getting the work done. Yeah.
Do you have the prevailing wage issues like we do in New York State?
Well, that's an interesting question, because on the last project, the old barn, the question was raised about whether we would have to pay prevailing wage. And we did not want to do that because we had already bid it all out, and we had all the pricing, and it was pricing that was not based on prevailing wage. And then somebody in the town said, well, you're going to have to pay prevailing wage, which was about 30% higher.
Of course, yeah.
And so what we ended up doing was going to the Attorney General of the state of Connecticut for an interpretation about whether we in fact had to pay prevailing wage, and it was determined that we did not, because we are a private organization. The work was not being directed by the town, it was being done by us privately. And so there was an exemption from the state statutes that require prevailing wage to be paid by municipalities because we weren't a municipality. So I don't know about the New York state statutes, but that was something.
That's a nice precedent that you've set.
Well, we actually
that we
didn't
would
set
love
the
to use
precedent.
here in
We
New
actually
York.
didn't set the precedent. There had been other precedent in Connecticut, that had been similar for some other historical work that had been done. So we had to find that. I can't remember off the top of my head. But there are some very specific criteria about when you have to do it, and we didn't fall within all of those. And so
We're all familiar up here with the prevailing wage requirements on municipal projects.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's interesting. I mean, it's an interesting question. You may have to do it here, which just means you have to budget accordingly.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's 30% more.
Yeah, exactly.
But if we could get around it using this type of a structure, then, that's something that we should absolutely consider.
One of the things that when we were looking at the case study for that, one of the things was, are you just using it to try to get around? Like, if that's really your intent.
Well, I think I've let the cat out of the bag at this
I think
point.
we ought to stop this discussion right now because it's
Well,
all
there's
being
a difference
recorded.
between the town deciding to do something, and we hope some people over here raise some money and give us some money, and a group that really gets really energized and gets really involved
Absolutely.
and does a lot more.
Yeah, there were
So
groups
we're
like
not
that.
at the
There
point
were,
you're
there were
at,
some
but we may
precedents.
be.
There were some precedents like us and what we were doing, which was completely independent, and we were raising the money, and we were,
Oh.
all this. And then there were some other examples where the town just sort of set up a conduit organization, and that didn't fly. So it goes.
Yeah, well, I think you have presented a blueprint for us to certainly look at, because the issues in Greenwich another, I guess it's also called Todd's Point, correct?
Todd's, it's called Greenwich Point, but informally Todd's Point.
Right. Some of those issues are very, very similar to the issues we have at Rye Town Park. And of course, we invite you to come and visit at any time.
Thank you.
I mean, we have a couple of older buildings. They are on the National Historic Register.
By the way, that's very important, because the FEMA exemption, as an example, is available for buildings that are either on or eligible to be on the National Register, but they have to have at least state
Right,
recognition.
and our tower building, prior commission authorized and got funded a new roof for that building for the same reasons that you did at Greenwich Point. And we're in the process of doing the same thing for our bathhouse building, because we have leaks all over the place, which threatens to close the building next spring if we don't do something about it.
Right.
So we have the same issues, where I guess
One last
10 years
word.
behind you.
Listen, you gotta start somewhere. We're 15 years or 20 years behind the Central Park Conservancy. But one word of advice, if you're gonna do the work on a staged basis, like we did for the first project, it's important to get your design, I think, overall done before you start staging, because you don't wanna have to redo work later, because changes get made and how it's gonna
We
be.
have an architect who is very familiar with, who's done the work before, and that's exactly what she's looking to do now.
Right. Well, good. Congratulations on moving forward on that.
Yeah.
Do you have a name for the organization?
No, we haven't started we've done this all through the commission.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And I think that people who see this, we have people in the audience who are very active in the park, and private individuals who may wish to get the ball rolling to start the Conservancy. And I think that all of us up here would certainly like to look into that kind of a vehicle.
Well, I would tell you, I've had, different careers, and this is something I do just as on a volunteer nonprofit basis. But it literally is the most rewarding thing that I've ever done, because it's so great to see. It's so great to see the work progress, to see the beauty of what you can do, to see people use it and love it, and you meet tons of people, because it's very collaborative. You can't do something like this and be closed about it, because everybody owns the beach and the park, and everybody loves it. So, our approach has always been to be very welcoming and collaborative with every group that wants to participate, and it just creates a positive dynamic that is very energetic and fulfilling. We have one administrator. We have actually one part-time administrator who works 15 hours a week, and that's one of the reasons that's one of our sort of pitch, if you will, to donors, because literally all the money that we raise goes into the park, with like 99.5%, because we raise hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and we pay, a part-time person for 15 hours a week. All the rest of us are on a volunteer basis.
That's great. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Chris?
Who does, did you contract out the food service?
Well, the food service, we do not manage the building. We turned it back over to the town, so the town has a concessionaire, and
So
they
decide
They decided, they have a whole process for that. And it's pretty funny, because it just opened last year, and people are constantly complaining to me about the food. As if I have anything to do with it.
Maybe we'll have to find out who does the food, so we don't use
Yeah.
It's
them.
not me, it's the town.
And how much, you said you raised about $250,000 with your fundraiser. Is there?
Each year,
Each year.
yeah.
Have you had some endowment type gifts, or is
We
it
haven't
really
had
all?
endowment, But each of our projects we've had sort of a lead naming gift,
Mm-hmm.
because we didn't have enough, we raised a good amount of money, but we didn't have enough to do the thing. So when we did the Innis Arden Cottage, the environmental center there, we had a gift from Livy and Doug Florin, a $300,000 gift. So the building is called Innis Arden Cottage, but the facility is called the Florin Family Environmental Center. So that was done with our private money, but then with a lead gift. When we did the the old barn, there was a couple who wanted to honor Sue Baker, who was a local teacher and ran oceanography classes there and was one of our original board members. So they arranged a $300,000 gift. They gave $150,000, and there were matching gifts to total of $300,000 gifts. So it was named the Sue H. Baker Pavilion. So it's been a combination of our annual benefit and then some lead gifts. And the town, we had to get approval from the town, obviously, to name these buildings after people, but they were very happy. It's really been a great collaborative event, and including with the town.
I'd like to
Sounds
invite the
great.
Baker and Florin families to move to Rybrook.
Or Rye. Where,
Portchester.
who coordinated with, I was interested that you have UConn involved there. How did that come up?
Well, because it's an environmental education facility, one of the organizations that uses it is the Greenwich Shellfish Commission. And somebody on the Shellfish Commission knew the folks up at UConn, and after a couple of years, of dialogue, this was formally agreed to. So it's quite an exciting, relatively new. They've only been there for a year, but they're doing some. This is their Western Long Island Sound facility, and so it's
Sounds great.
It's pretty cool. Yeah, it really is.
We have some educational institutions in Westchester that may be
Oh,
interested.
there's
was
one other
thinking.
thing that I would mention to you, and that is that there are, in Connecticut, I'm assuming that there would be in New York State as well, there are grants available for historical buildings. We were able, for the Baker Pavilion, we were able to get a $500,000 grant. It was for the after Hurricane Sandy, there was grant money allocated to the states, the northeastern states, for historical buildings that were damaged by Hurricane Sandy. So we got $500,000, which was the largest size grant. Now that was very specific, but there are other grants. And
We're applying for grants. We have a
Yeah.
grant writer working on
Well,
that.
and it might be that your 501c3 is the one that applies for the grants, if you end up going that route.
Anybody, I saw a young lady with her hand up. Step.
Beth Matthews from the Friends of the Rye Town Park.
Could you step to the microphone so that the world can hear you?
So we are lucky enough to have Friends of Rye Town Park and a Rye Town Park Alliance already around for us.
I had a question for Chris here. What other uses were realistically considered before you got around to the environmental education center? Were there others that looked like they would have been doable?
I think that there was sort of very firm consensus that environmental science was the right thing. In the old barn, the Bruce Museum for 30 years had been operating a seaside center, and it had been damaged in the hurricane. It was also not very well organized at that point. So the Bruce Museum was very interested in moving over to the Innisarden Cottage. So that was pretty clearly the forerunner. But it's not. I mean, that's formally what it's for. But it's also used by garden clubs. It's used by the Historical Society. It's become, I think, really the favorite place for organizations in town to have meetings, because you can do a lecture with almost 80 people. And we have chairs, that we sort of set up, and everyone puts them back down. There's really no charge to use the facility. So it's worked out rather well. There's our next project is a beautiful our next and really the final large project is a building called the Chimes Building, which is on the far side of the point, which has a big Chimes tower. It was built in 1896. It's really beautiful. I should have brought a picture. But that will most likely be sort of a water sports and recreation focused building. Right now, the Old Greenwich Yacht Club, which is a public yacht club, it's not a public yacht club that's at Greenwich Point, and the Greenwich Community Sailing Program operate out of that building, and they will continue to after we've restored it. And then there may be like a rowing organization that goes there, and a kayak rental place, and so water sports and recreation is another purpose. I'd also like to just mention that we have an organization at Greenwich Point called Friends of Greenwich Point, which was the original organization that some of us were members of when we left to form the Greenwich Point Conservancy. We originally had wanted to do this within the Friends of Greenwich Point, but that organization had historically focused on the naturalist elements at the point, you know, birding and taking care of trail maintenance and things of that nature. So we split off and created what we call a sister organization. So the Friends of Greenwich Point and the Greenwich Point Conservancy are really the two stewardship organizations at Greenwich Point. We consider ourselves to be closely aligned, although separate organizations.
Thank you, Chris. Very much appreciated, and I think we'll be in further contact.
This was
This
great.
is very, very much appreciated.
so much.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate it, Chad.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll jump back to the park management report. We have co-directors and assistant directors. Our new management team will present the report, and then the accountant will give the financial statement. So you got a head start by doing the pledge.
Is he going to introduce himself?
My name is Luke Glockenberg, and right now I'm the acting co-park director at Rytown Park. I see on the agenda that you had the financial report for August 31st, but I actually have one that compares April 1st of last year to October 1st of 2016 to this season, up to date. And up to date, even though we are not done charging it, we are roughly $4,000 ahead. And I say roughly because here and there we have computer problems sometimes with the reports. We make notes of these, but they're not major incidents. Sometimes the computer will record someone $1 or $2 short when they really weren't. So besides that, everything has been great in August and September. We had a little bit of a bad start with weather till Labor Day weekend, but all in all, we had a great Labor Day. When we get to the middle of August, we tend to lose employees, and I'm going to cover the cashier department and parking attendant department, and Bill will cover the grounds crew, security, and lifeguards. So with cashiers and parking attendants, we usually have college students going back to school early, or they'll have, for our high school employees, they'll have band or an athletic training camp the last 2 weeks of August. So we do tend to lose some, but we schedule everything perfectly fine right through September. Catherine and myself, Catherine Aguilar, who's the other co-park director, will jump in a booth from time to time if we have to for very short staff. For the parking attendants, it's basically the same thing. We only have a couple of college students. The rest are in high school, so I, from time to time, or security, if they have more staff, will help park cars in the back or in the dirt lot. But everything has been great up until this point, even though we've had a short staff, and I think Bill will cover the rest.
Thank you, Luke.
Thank you.
I just want to say I've been involved with Rytown Park one way or the other for many, many years as a resident nearby, and the way the parking was managed this year is the best I've ever seen. They were so efficient, they were so pleasant and polite, and I noticed it frequently. And when they were not busy with the parking, they'd be cleaning up litter and things like that. So I just want to put in a plug that this was something that's, for many people, it's the first meeting they have with a park employee is the guy who's showing them where to park. And if you do that right, you get off to a good start. So I guess that's
Can I ask what was different this year?
Pardon?
What was different this year?
Well, I just think the management.
Just the people that were doing it were more
We've been
organized?
discussing for a long time the importance of saying, welcome to Rytown Park when people come in, and you see the difference. It's easier if there's an issue comes up, people are more friendly. If you've been friendly to them, they're less likely to blame you or complain about you. So I think that's my understanding of how it worked.
Julie, we have a new department head this year.
Yeah. Okay.
So, I don't know that you wanted to discuss or want me to discuss at all about the personnel situation? No?
No.
Okay. So, moving on to beach operations. It's been a good year. There have been a few health issues that have come up. People who were out in the sun too long, having heat exhaustion, but the lifeguard staff was very good at monitoring the park, the beach, making themselves aware and encouraging people to use lotion, stay cool, and because of that, I think we had a good. Again, we've had good success and good public response in terms of our operations. Just going down along here, the park maintenance is there's so many different aspects to it, and we've heard about what happened when old buildings get run down, and they're so expensive to fix. I've always been of the feeling that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and so we've tried to be proactive. And during this past time period, we had a couple people notice that there were a few small branches that were dead that were over the area where people walk along by Rye Beach Avenue. That we took care of those. We had a report from one of the previous commissioners at Rytown Park, Matt Cunningham, that he noticed that some of the sidewalk sections had been kind of twisted around through the tree roots affecting them, so they're not level. So we got to work on that. It's not like the permanent solution, but they fixed up all the ones that were in trouble going on. This is the best year in my recollection as to the functioning of our pond. It's doing a great job. It's the aerators are keeping the algae from getting overgrown, and this was from a grant, just like the man was talking about from Todd's Point. The Friends of Rytown Park had gotten a grant of around $500,000 back in 2002, I think it was, to redo the pond, and they did this with the idea that they would stop the pollutants and overflow from going out into the sound. In fact, that's how we justified getting that money. So it's been doing a great job with that. So those are some of the things. One of the things that I think Jamie Jensen is back there, and she and Russ Gold from the Alliance were thinking about, is there a way we could improve the turf that's across from the pond, that is the main overflow parking area, because that gravel and rock that was deposited there happened when they dredged out the old the materials that had been put in there when the pond had been shrunk back in the 80s. So anyway, this is something
I'm sure that we can. We need to compile a to-do list.
Yes.
To work on over the so-called off-season.
Yes.
Capital work, that's part of it, obviously.
Yes. Okay, so you heard about the finances and security. Larry Miano, who's our manager of security, is putting together incident reports that have been filed over the summer, so we have a picture of exactly what that happened with that. There's only one incident that we had that occurred during this last time period. As far as park development goes, I have a whole variety of things. Is anybody here from the, oh, no. I thought Bob Clyott was going to be here.
He is.
Oh, there he is. I'm sorry, I didn't see you way back there. So he'll be talking with you. And we had, in cooperation with the Rye Arts Center, we had artists painting scenes at Rytown Park. There were two of them, one down by the pond and another one looking out over the boardwalk over from Rytown Park to Playland. That was part of an on-location program, and I think many people say how beautiful the park is, and it's an inspiration for artists who are looking for places to paint. Okay. And I know that, Julie, you were at the grand opening for the
Labyrinth.
The Labyrinth that opened just yesterday. It seems like so long ago. No, it's Sunday. Sunday.
A lot of us were there.
Beautiful day.
And I think
wonderful event.
You, me, and 400
glad
other
to see,
people.
so many people, the commissioners, and I know Debbie was there, and it's a very moving symbol of what the Soul Riders is all about, and I think most of you know the Soul Riders. And is somebody here from the Soul Riders tonight too? No, I know they're requesting to do the Paint the Town Pink thing that's on the agenda. So, I think those are the,
Right. Thank you, Bill.
I think that covers the main points.
Thank you.
Okay.
Much appreciated. Thank you very much. Navy, you want to talk a little bit about money? Financials report, statement?
Good evening. So what you have before you.
Introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Navy Vujanovic. I'm with Meyer, Markey and Justic, and I am here to present you the statement of revenue and expenses for the 8 months ended August 31st, 2017. So what you should have in front of you is a revenue and expense statement with 4 columns. The first column represents the 2017 budget for the year. So we expect to end the year at $103,000, almost $104,000 surplus. The second column is a pro rata budget. So what we do here is we break down the budget to where we think 8 months should be, and we adjust it accordingly. And then the third column is the most important column because that's where we are 8 months into the year. So as of August 31st, this captures every dollar that came in terms of revenue, as well as all the expenses, salaries, benefits, taxes, and all the other expenses that were required to maintain the park. And then the fourth column is the difference between actual and budget. So I'll draw your attention to the third column. So we, in 8 months, at August 31st, we generated $1,096,000, almost $1,097,000 in revenue. So we're $52,000 ahead of budget. And we expect that to continue. I think we're going to have a fairly strong, as Luke mentioned, we're going to have a fairly strong September as well. And then if you look a little further down, so we had a little bit more revenue, but we also went a little higher on expenses, just as compared to budget. So we would think that our salaries would have been at $435. We actually were at $450 because in order for us to service the population that frequent our park and our beach, we spent more money on salaries, benefits, and taxes. And then you continue, that theory holds the same with benefits. Same thing with utilities, we spent more. And some of that is also due in terms of timing. We get certain bills up front, and then we don't get them again for the rest of the year. And as you can see here, the major differences in terms of operations and maintenances, you see the fluctuation there of $10,977. We had an appraisal done of different assets of our organization earlier in the year to get a sense of what we owned, because we didn't have a true picture and we didn't have a listing. We also needed that appraisal for the auditors. So we spent $24,000 as opposed to thinking we were going to spend $20,000 for the whole year. The other major fluctuation that I'll draw to your attention is in the middle of that area. It's building, grounds, and maintenance. We spent about $18,000 in the admin building just in repairs. And then there's other things in there that happen throughout the year, but that was the biggest chunk of that fluctuation. All in, our total expenses are $877,000, almost $878,000. We have a net surplus through August of $219,256. As I said, we expect more revenue to continue in September, and then obviously it falls off. And then as the year progresses, we'll continue to have expenses. We'll have salaries, we'll have different expenses, obviously some repairs and maintenance, utilities. But based on what we see right now, we have every possibility, or we feel very confident that we're going to make that surplus of 103 plus some. I also tell you that we're going to close September 30th. We'll prepare the September 30th financials and then roll right into the budget. So we should have a budget, I'm hoping November the latest, for our TP line by line, and we can go through it and see if you have any fluctuation, any changes or edits to it.
Right. And I think this year, we've been talking about it. We really need to sit down with a capital budget.
Mm-hmm.
That's a meaningful budget.
Right.
Looking out, we have so many things on it. We did have a lawsuit filed. Somebody tripped on the blacktop, and anybody who's been there at the park, in the parking lot, knows that that's something that really needs to be attended to. And just everything that we can do, even if it's just a wish list that we can project for the future, and have an idea of what's ahead of us
Right.
for the next 5 years or
Yeah,
so.
we'll include that,
Yeah.
as you said, a wish list, and just see if we have the capital. And we've had, knock wood, 2 years of a decent surplus, so we've got some money to spend.
So we should, I mean, it should just be a constant document that every year we keep
Yeah.
updating with, and things that are 5 years out, in a few years, start to become
I mean,
higher
there are some
priority. And
major-
just see, because I think that's the only way to figure out where we
I know.
best can spend
There are some
our
major
money.
things, like I just mentioned, and we all know about the bathhouse, we know about the tower building, potentially. The sidewalks that were mentioned in the report, some of it needs to be replaced, others can be repaired. The parking areas, you know, and then some of our equipment. We got a great start last year and this year by replacing some of our vehicles. You know, we want to keep that constantly updated, knowing what the useful life is, when golf carts, for example, have to be replaced. And just keep on top of it completely, so we, the commissioners, have an idea, and the public has an idea of the improvements that are needed and what we're planning to do this year, next year, and the year after.
Yeah, we'll incorporate that in the budget process. Okay, any questions?
Questions from the commissioners? No? Okay, thank you, Navy. Capital projects, speaking of that, I'll try to go through this briefly but thoroughly. The status of the bathhouse roof, as was reported earlier last month, Lisa Easton is working on an updated plan, and we have applied for funds from the state through Assemblyman Otis, and we've been advised that that request for funds, which will ultimately come from the Dormitory Authority, is before the Assembly Codes Committee, and hopefully we'll be hearing from them within, I'm not going to say weeks, but hopefully within a matter of a couple of months. And meanwhile, we have in our packet a plan from Linda to start the process to go out to bid. Obviously, we can't award a bid until we know that we have the money, but we need to do that because our goal is, on the bathhouse, to get the roof stabilized before the beginning of the next beach season. As I say, if we don't do that, we're in danger of using potties at the beach next year, and nobody wants to use porta potties at the beach. So that's the bathhouse roof. The seawall, Debbie and I were on a conference call with FEMA and with our engineering firm, and we're ready to actually do bid documents. We have requested that the actual scope of work be cut back somewhat, as we talked about, a couple of months, so that at least 50% of the wall will be not torn down and replaced, but will be repaired, chipped, and the masonry will be chipped and forget the word, stuccoed, with joint repair. Pointing, that's right. I do this on my buildings. How did I forget that word? According to FEMA, because the large project had been approved, anything that we do that falls within their approval is subject to reimbursement. So restoring the overlook, which has to be restored because if we wanted to eliminate the overlook, we have to go through a long process of changing the plan, which we do not want to do. Replacing the part of the wall from the overlook to the Rice City wall has been approved. New capping has been approved. Replacing the sidewalk and curbs have been approved. So all that will be included. They've also approved a road replacement at the end of Dearborn Avenue, which is, the commission will have to discuss with the city of Rye because it's their road. It's the park sidewalk and the city's road. So that's basically the status of the seawall. Sidewalks we've mentioned. And Debbie, you want to take us through the mold remediation status, please?
Yes, we, at the last meeting, the commission approved a resolution to award the contract for mold remediation to Crystal Restorations. We did a thorough walkthrough of the facility with the gentleman who conducted our mold assessment, and also senior park staff. Luke Lockenberg was with me. And they went through a very detailed assessment of what would need to be done in order, what will need to be done in order for the mold remediation to be conducted. I've also looked into the proper sequencing of this project. What would happen if we do the mold remediation now and we have storms over the winter? Would we just have the same problem in the spring? So could we postpone this work? Or so one of the essential steps we have to do is to figure out how watertight our buildings are before we can go forward with the mold remediation. So that's in process right now. I've put out an RFP to drain maintenance companies to have our leaders scoped, and we've got other drain maintenance issues at the park that need to be dealt with. So I'm waiting for those proposals to come in, and we'll be sequencing it. We also, there's a fair amount of electrical work wiring that would need to be removed in order for the remediation work to happen. So this is becoming a larger task that we may want to wait for the roof to be replaced before we tackle.
Thank you. Any comments from the commissioners on the capital work so far? No? Okay. The request from Soul Riders for their Tie the Town Pink breast cancer awareness campaign. Do we have somebody from Soul Riders?
I actually told them they didn't have to come to this meeting or the Rise City meeting, because
That's okay.
we had done it a number of years, and I just felt like
I
it
have,
wasn't necessary.
I think we have a unanimous approval from all of us for the Soul Riders Tie the Town Pink campaign. Am I correct? Yes.
They did Bill mentioned it, but the event they had on Sunday at Ride Town Park was really, I mean, the amazing weather really helped, but we got people walking around the park. There was almost 400 people came, and the park showcased itself really, really well, and I think a lot of people were there that don't spend as much time in the park, and it was really impressive, and it was an amazing event. It was tear-jerking when survivors of breast cancer got up and spoke about how much Soul Riders had helped them. It was really moving. Even a young woman who was a junior in high school, local woman who found out she had had cancer, and it was just really amazing how they have helped her, and she's now cancer-free, thank goodness. But it was just a really moving, inspiring event, and then being in that beautiful park and being on the water was really wonderful.
I can only echo what Jolie said. It was really a moving event. And the labyrinth that they installed is absolutely fantastic. It's a great addition to the park, located in a perfect place for it. It's kind of out of the way, so anybody who wants to go there, it's a meditation space. People who want to go there, it will be away from almost everything else, but yet in a completely accessible area. It is really terrific. The pumpkin painting event. There's a proposal to hold a community pumpkin painting party. And there's a flyer in our package. Is there anybody who wants to speak on this? I wonder who that is.
I think she wants me to be here for moral support.
Sarah?
But
Announce yourself, Sarah.
Sarah's a great addition to the staff of the park, and I guess you do some work for the town of Rye too. But
Yes, she is an employee of the town of Rye. She's one of Debbie's, I don't know if she's your left hand or your right hand, but one of those hands.
Or both.
Or both. And she's tremendously She's terrific.
She
And
went
she,
from being the person who was involved in the paperwork to actually organizing an event. So I think this is what is her passion, I would say, right?
Thanks, Bill.
So she's.
Okay, thanks.
So-
Thank you for the introduction. I'll be fast. We are, myself and the staff, Luke Lockenberg, Catherine, Larry Miano, and Bill. We are asking for permission to host a pumpkin painting contest on October 22nd from 9 a.m. to about 1 p.m. We expect to have refreshments, the pumpkin painting contest, goodie bags, just basically a fall festival type of event. This year we're starting out small, but we hope next year we can expand and kind of build off of this. I definitely want to thank the Friends of Wright Town Park for supporting us in this event. They are very thrilled and would actually like to plan more events with me in the future and in our office, so that's very exciting.
terrific.
The Rye Arts Center has partnered with us. They will be providing the paint, the paintbrushes, and they will be providing instructors to help the kids paint and stay clean, basically. Ridgeway Garden Center and John Zicka Landscaping have offered to donate pumpkins so the children can paint, all different sizes of pumpkins, so that'll be nice, along with some hay and flowers to kind of decorate the park and make it festive. So that's that.
terrific. Thank you. Any questions from the commissioners? Nope.
No, great idea.
Okay.
Yeah, good luck.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Okay, and next request is from the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI. It's for their walkathon, and they've done this before.
And before they're
welcome
so
back.
organized that they ask us so far in advance. Usually we're like a week out.
This is for May of 2018, so we have a little bit of time.
Are you Marie? Yes. Hi, Debbie. Hi, I'm Marie Considine. I'm with NAMI Westchester. NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, which is a national organization, and I represent the Westchester affiliate. So yes, we are thrilled to say that we have done all 5 of our walks here at Rye Town Park, and we're hoping to have our 6th. Bill, Terry, Steve, and all the staff have been terrific. Every year we've had a great turnout. We always haven't had the best weather, but we've had a really upbeat, fun time. Our plans for the 2018 walk is really the same as it's been for the past few years. I can answer any questions you may have. We usually have about 460 people who show up.
Wow.
And that really hasn't grown. Thankfully, the fundraising that each person does grows, but the number of people coming hasn't. But it really is a great introduction to your park, to a lot of people who haven't been there before. We used to do a lunch afterward at Seaside Johnny's. This year we did it at the Pier Restaurant and Tiki Bar. Your new place had just opened, I think a week before our walk. And then some go to Playland, some do a picnic in your park. So it's really been a really nice day. I've been involved I've done 3 walks. This will be my 4th.
Thank you. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. One thing I'll just add is that for the past 2 years, we've done ribbon tying around some areas that Bill has been very specific about designating that we could do for the month of May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month. So that's something that I probably should have put in the letter. And if you need a separate letter for that, I can do that too. But that's something we've done the past couple years, just tie NAMI ribbons around the poles and places that he's designated for mental health awareness for the month of May.
Do we want to just approve that too, or
Yes.
do we need to wait for a letter?
No, I
Because I know
think-
you ask us in Rye City also to do
Right.
that, and we always say yes.
Okay,
So-
great. Thank you so much.
We can only approve the stuff in the park. Rye
Yeah,
City
you have
has
to-
to
yeah,
approve the
that's
stuff
right.
around.
I mean,
the-
but again, you're so nice to come, and we always appreciate it, but, well, if you get it done before December 31st, but I'm happy just to, if you want to send us an email to Rye City and not
Okay.
have to come, I mean,
All right.
appreciate your time that you dedicate to this, so not having to
It's a
come to
wonderful
another
cause.
meeting when we've approved it a lot. I'll give
It's
you
a
your.
wonderful cause, as are all of the people who've come before us. It's wonderful programs. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Marie. The Rye Art Center. We have sketch proposals, and I see our friend. Introduce yourself again and tell us what this is about.
Yeah, hi, I'm Bob Clyott, resident of Rye City. Okay, there are a couple things to discuss today. I wanted to make sure that people on the commission got this one page as well, because it wasn't in the PDF that I downloaded, and if not, I'll bring one up.
I don't think so.
No,
I don't think so.
we got that. It's got sketches.
Thank you.
Oh, so that's what it looks like.
It seemed like
that's
it would
cool.
be a little confusing just from
Yes,
the.
it doesn't look like the sketch on the
Pencil
the
sketches.
pencil sketch.
Oh,
Gotta figure out what that was.
Oh, okay, that'd be helpful.
Like right now? Yeah. Oh, cool. Technology.
Fred, do you think you could help us project a picture onto the screen, please?
If only
While
because-
he's doing that, since we do have a council meeting immediately hereafter, let us move on to the next item, the resolution to grant a license extension to Homestyle.
We have to get, where doesn't he need this to do it?
He must have
he has to come up and do it
He
here.
has to come up and
Oh,
do it
he's
here.
coming up, okay.
Yeah. So while we're doing
Well,
that,
I do have a second agenda item that also was submitted, but maybe didn't, and it doesn't need a visual, which has to do with the existing sculpture, or I can come back and do them both together. We get to the next item first.
yeah, let's do that together because we do want to get through the agenda. The resolution to grant a short license extension to Homestyle Grill. As you are all aware, the Ocean Grill operating there, their license expires at the end of October. There have been proposals submitted in response to the RFP. It is unlikely, in fact, it will not happen before the end of October, possibly at our October meeting. And we don't know whether the Ocean Grill will continue or not. So there is a request to extend the term of the license for up to one. I'd like to change the resolve part for up to 1 month. He actually requested to 11/14. I don't know if he'll need more time, but it's on condition that access be provided to the successful food licensee or proposer if it is not him. Obviously, if it's him, there's no problem, but we want to ensure a smooth transition, and so the proposal is to extend the time for, and I'd like to change the wording for up to 1 month. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
So
Bill?
we're saying November 3rd, is that 30 days? Is that November 30th?
They're not having events. They may have an event in October, but they're not, there's no proposal for them to have events in November. It's a cleanup time.
So it's not, the restaurant won't be open.
Right,
That's correct.
because otherwise they'd have to have everything out.
Right,
if
right. They
for
need
some
time to
reason
move
not.
everything instead of just running out.
That makes sense to me.
Sure.
I'll move on a resolution.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman.
let's change the wording
Oh,
to
wanna amend it
enter
first?
into and execute a license extension up to November 30th,
Yeah, it's just-
Number 30.
2018.
Enter into and execute a license extension
Up to November 30th. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
We have to amend motion to these resolutions. Just vote on it.
Just vote. Please call the roll.
I think we're clarifying it more than anything.
That's fine.
Commissioner Killian,
Yes.
Commissioner Falenka.
Yes.
Commissioner Rosenberg.
Yes.
President Zuckerman.
Yes, thank you. Okay. Are we ready, Fred? Okay, then we can do the next one. A resolution to award a tree clearing and stump grinding contract piggybacking on the Village of Rybrook. I know
So,
Paul is familiar.
That's how it
so they
feels,
already
all
have
right.
one, you guys already have it existing, or is this a new one for you too?
No, they have an existing
We have this
contract.
existing.
Existing.
And we are permitted on, Debbie, you've done some research, exactly what this is.
We put out an RFP in the spring for landscape maintenance, tree clearing, and also snow clearing. We're awarding the contracts separately. The tree clearing proposals that we received were not as beneficial as the contract that Rybrook already has. Therefore, we are not issuing the RFP. We're not issuing the contract. Rather, what we're doing is what's called piggybacking on the Rybrook contract. It contained a clause which suggested that other municipalities could piggyback if they chose to, and so we're exercising that right.
Okay.
May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Any further questions? Please call the roll.
Commissioner Killian?
Yes.
Commissioner Falenka?
Yes.
Commissioner Rosenberg?
Yes.
President Zuckerman?
Yes, thank you. And now, Mr. Clayat.
I only brought 4, so if one of you could.
Here, Fred, I think we want to put this on the overhead thing.
Yeah.
Brand new. It's actually the first time we're using this.
Do we have to accept this annual donation? That seems like it will take a second. Do we have to do that? Item 11.
Where? Oh, I didn't even see it. Where's item 11?
Annual donation of family membership to Rice City and Rybrook.
Oh.
Yeah, let's.
Oh, four. Yes, the next item, the annual donation of a family membership to Rice City and to the Rice City and Rybrook Portchester Chambers of Commerce. This is done every year. And I guess they auction this off? Is that what
It
they
gets
do?
auctioned off at the dinner dance, I
At the
believe.
dinner dance, yeah.
Rye does the one at Mistletoe Magic.
Right, and
Oh, okay.
Portchester, Rybrook Portchester does it at the,
At the dinner
at
dance.
the dinner dance.
Next month.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yeah, aye.
Yes.
It reminds me of high school, but more high-tech.
Thank you, Fred.
Thank you, yeah. Okay, so again, Bob Clyott, City of Rye resident. For the Rye Arts Center, Meg Rodriguez apologizes. There was a family medical emergency and she's been called out of town. But we've worked with this. So 2 agenda items today. The first is, I don't know which order is best, but this is the next piece that we're working with the sculptor and discussing, and I wanted to update the commission and the community on what's being discussed, just to make sure that we are good to move forward. Something just happened, okay. Am I bumping something?
Maybe Mayor Rosenberg knows how to operate his own
I don't.
equipment.
There you go.
Here, I'll just move it. Good. Maybe that helps. And then the second thing is the piece that's there now that we installed a year ago, and kind of
process that's about that, the future of that, and discussing that. So we can talk about this one first. This one is Natsuki Takeuchi, also from the Art Students League of New York. She had the piece that you see, the two color images there in the middle, was done down in Riverside Park. That piece is not available, but was the inspiration for the next piece that we have asked her to create for us. That piece does have so these elements, so the sketches that you've seen and have in your packet are just her initial sketches for that, what that would look like. The shape is sort of more of a pod. There is a swing inside of it.
Cool.
Which, a swing, yeah. This piece that's
Like a,
up there also had a swing, and it was extremely popular with the public. Yes. Is the swing movable? Yes. Swing is movable on a rigid, so it doesn't go side to side. It just goes in and out, and then and the structure is quite strong. So that is lots of steel goes into that. The piece that she's conceiving for Rye Town Park would have this lattice work that you see here, in the sense that they're fabric strips that are woven through what's this? It's a sort of reinforcing grid that you might put in concrete. So those spaces are enough for this to be latticed around. That's all welded over the outside frame of that. So then there are these sort of window-like forms that are made with something like skylight material. So light gets in there, there's visibility in and out, but it also creates a sort of a interesting form that could then go on the landscape. The places that that's being considered for installation are two, either one of which would be good for the artist, and I guess in conversations with Bill and the Rye Art Center and yourselves, if there's a view, I'll put that sheet up. I like this. All right, so points A and B. B, if I've gotten it right, is just inside the newly renovated stairs, right alongside the water, over by the walkway to the boardwalk. That
just
that's,
point at,
oh, B.
Way up on top.
oh, okay. Oh, sorry, I didn't notice that was a B.
That's a
Sorry,
B.
I should use different color.
I see
It
the
looked
A.
like a, okay,
Right.
B. Okay, now it looks like a B.
Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, so that's B. One nice thing about that is that
See A.
it sort of visually connects. It's on the side of the of Playland, so it kind of, since it has that playful swing element and colors, the thought is that it might be visible to people that are on the boardwalk over at Playland, and it might entice them to say, "Wow, what's that thing over there? We've never been over there." So that was the idea, was to kind of stretch the that whimsical quality.
It's just before you get to the end of the park, that
Well,
where those steps are.
Let me just interject something. I think it's less important that we decide tonight where it's going to go than that we simply grant the approval to move forward,
Fine.
okay? Because I think this is, as you use the word whimsical, yes, and it's a very interesting piece, and I think it would enhance the park tremendously. So,
So who, what about the money aspects of it? So what, is,
No implications for the park. Again, between the sculptor and the Rye Arts Center, we are going to make that happen for the community.
it's very
for the park.
nice,
terrific.
really nice.
I love the idea of art in the park.
We would ask that continue to be a rider on the parks policy, the insurance.
All right.
you know.
I think we've set a good example from last time that we can get these things going, and I think all of us are in favor of having art in the park. And that's a good title for the, for the project, Art in the Park.
Yes.
Yes.
What about the foundation?
Okay, so that piece will be, she says it's going to be like the one she did in New York, so it needs to go on 2 I-beams. Those I-beams are subterranean. They get dug into a trench, and then they sit on 2 round post hole kind of concrete frame, they go down in. So they're fairly straightforward. It's not doing a whole pad like the other piece.
Okay.
The pad was something that we arranged to have donated. What about this installation?
Right. I haven't gotten there yet.
I think what we need to do is, like we did last time, have a specification drawn by somebody who knows how to do that, so that a contractor, however we obtain the contractor, we can give it to him and say, please build this.
Right. An approved contractor.
Right.
Yes. Okay, so you said something about art in the park is a good thing. Perfect segue to the second sheet that was submitted, one pager. I'll pass out the 3 that I have and put one up. Sorry for the quantity issue.
If
Now-
anybody's here for the Architectural Review Board, it's not this meeting. No. No, go out this door and make a right.
Good pickup, Paul.
You're welcome. Yeah. Yeah.
To the left? Do they go left?
To the right, to the right.
To the right, to the right. Okay.
We're gonna have to figure out a way with all these people and do a quick executive session.
Go to my office.
Okay.
This is an update on the existing piece that's on the pad that was done last year. And as we mentioned in our last, when we last came in front of this commission, there has been interest in possibly acquiring that piece on a permanent basis. We have a price from the Art Students League. We have people in the community, and the Rye Art Center is willing to do that fundraising. What we need to know is what's the process for going forward, and and whether to get an approval that the park would like to receive that as a gift. When we spoke last, you said let's get some data. Let's go out and talk to people. So the Rye Art Center has done that, and the results of that are here. And it may be a little small, so I'll try to read that to you with my glasses. See, 88% are in favor of a permanent sculpture and art installations in Rytown Park. There were 64 members of the community.
Bob, let me interrupt you.
Sure.
You surveyed 64 members, and that I don't think is really a representative sample of park goers, and it's obviously not scientifically conducted. I think that the commissioners are really capable of making a decision as to whether they want this to be a permanent installation or not.
Great.
And I think that the commissioners, I don't know if they're ready to make a decision now, but.
I am.
Are you?
Unless someone has a downside to it.
I love it.
You wanna hear
can't-
from the
I
Friends
think
of-
Beautiful. I
having
think we should keep it.
art
Friends of Crawford.
in the park is
Rytown Park.
amazing and a
Yep.
great addition,
I agree.
so. But if people want to speak, yeah, we
Please.
should let them.
Please.
Come.
Again, Beth Matthews from the Friends of the Rytown Park. The Friends are really enthused and excited about the idea of art in the park.
Okay.
They are questioning whether the original idea was to have rotating art, since the current piece has caused a lot of joy and some not so joy among some of the people who've seen it. And so one of the thoughts was, one of the questions I was asked to bring up tonight was, is there an anticipation of rotation so that people who don't like all the pieces can be reminded that things go away and new things come in? But we want to be on the record here that we're very supportive of having art in the park, but we'd really like to see rotation and not a whole lot of permanent installation that might impinge on the passive recreational aspects of the park.
Yeah, thank you. Russ?
Wait, can I just ask, I just want to ask a question. You know, unfortunately, the nature of this kind of art, it's very difficult to have a lot of rotating. I mean, obviously, we're contemplating something else coming in, you know, so I'm just sort of throwing that out there. But I guess if you can give us any more detail on, like, specifically about people feeling like somehow it's taking away from their recreation in the park. Not, I know you referred to some people didn't like it, not that, but you seem to say it impinged on the recreation, unless I heard you wrong, just to understand that.
The Friends is in general interested in more passive recreation and making sure that there's room and opportunity to do that. This is not, the piece that's there is certainly not keeping anybody from throwing a ball or seeing the water. But I think it's in the slippery slope idea that we'd like to see art in the park. We're not necessarily interested in having Storm King on the sound. You know.
Thank you. Russ?
Thank you.
If I can address, oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's probably good to have. Russ Gold, City of Rye, New York. I kind of echo Beth's sentiments. Again, you know, speaking for myself and Jamie and the Rye Town Park Alliance, I think it's safe to say that we all also advocate having art in the park. You know, I think it's an enhancement. However, and we love the things that the Rye Arts Center, you know, promote and do in our park. However, I think there needs to be a process on how we go forward on projects like this. If we're going to consider a permanent installation, or if we're going to consider multiple installations. So if the next one goes in, and then that becomes permanent, and then we go on to the next one. And to Beth's point, you know, we don't want to be Storm King, we don't want to be PepsiCo. Again, I think, you know, everybody here has always said that they're in favor of art in the park, and I include myself in that group. I just think that before we just say yes tonight, I think we have to think about it a little bit and develop a process before we go forward.
Thank you, Russ. I think that we kind of have developed a process. That piece of art has been there for a year or so. And I am also of the mind that we don't want the park to be totally filled with art all the time. This is one piece. We're adding another piece that is apparently not going to become permanent. We may have several pieces in different places in the park. The question is regarding this single piece. And I do understand that some people like it and some people do not like it. And the fact of the matter is that's the purpose of art. It makes you think. And I would be really, really upset with any piece of art that had unanimous approval all the time. That's not the purpose of art.
The nature of art is that it's subjective.
That is correct.
But if
So,
you recall that back to the original discussion about COPE, was that it was
Yes.
originally intended to be a temporary installation, and that when we poured this pad, and the contractor agreed that they would remove it if it came to that. All right. So
right.
now just okay. Anyway, I think
All
I've
right.
said what I have to say.
Jamie?
Jamie Jensen, 588 Forest. I think I'm speaking as a resident and a taxpayer. I'm not speaking for the Alliance because I haven't talked to people from the Alliance. I think the COPE is beautiful, so I'm immediately biased. I think it is such a treasure for one of our community centers to have given this to us as a gift. I think it reflects back on the earlier conversation we had with the founder of Todd's Point, Greenwich Point Conservancy. The more we work at bringing people to the park in the shoulder seasons and year-round, community members from Rybrook and City of Rye and Port Chester, the more we will feel like a community. and Rhinebeck, the more we will feel like a community park. So from that perspective, anything we do in our park that brings out neighbors in that broad town sense, I really want to encourage. From where I stand and from what people say to me, I think the challenge is everybody's going to want to play at the park now, right? Can I do this? Can I do that? Can I do that? So to Russ's point, it's not necessarily about a process for the Rye Art Center or talking about art. It's a process for anything we do that's permanent in the park. And how do we do that? And how do we think about it moving forward? The Labyrinth was controversial, briefly. This was presented as a temporary, and now it's permanent. And I want it to be permanent. I'm saying that. But I understand people's hesitation, because next thing you know. So I'm just, if you feel comfortable moving forward, but I would ask that you make those two decisions very separate. The conversation about the piece that's being presented today and the process of continuing to work with these New York artists that want to come in and be able to present their work in a community park, which I think is a wonderful service. And the idea of how do we go about saying yes to permanent structures. And so I'm not saying anything other than, yes, I really want this, but I understand why people are a little worried about the long term. So your leadership is going to be really important in this, especially as you guys get elected and reelected and on and off and et cetera. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. I agree, but of course, there will be another commission next year and the year after as some of us leave, and either voluntarily or involuntarily. And new decisions will have to be made. And decisions sometimes are, even decisions on permanent art might not be permanent, because another commission may say, we do want to change it, and how do we get something else there? But my personal feeling is that for this particular sculpture, which thank God it's a bit controversial, I'd like to see it stay there. And
So I like it too, and I would be ready to vote to keep it there, but I think she has a good point with the process, and I think about having a process, and I think you made the point further saying, people come on and off this commission. So having and I'm sitting here thinking, okay, what does the process look like? And I don't know the answer to that, but I would like to hear what the answer to that is. I won't be. I'm done on December 31st,
If I could
sadly.
add one,
So I would say, can we wait till next meeting to make this decision, and everyone's not here? And in that interim time, think a little bit about if we want to put a process in place and what that would look like. I don't know that a month is going to really make a difference, is it?
no, I
Tell
think
me.
I had something that's fairly relevant though, on this topic. The piece was brought in, and I fully admit, I stood up here and said it's temporary installation, and then changes happened at the Art Students League, and we had an opportunity to acquire it at a price that is really affordable to the nonprofit. Normally, a piece like this would easily be $250,000, a couple $100,000 if you were to go out and commission something of this, which means that if we're ever thinking about an acquisition of a piece anywhere like this, the answer simply wouldn't work. I mean, these economics in this community, I'm pretty sure it'd be really hard to raise that amount of money to acquire something and it be done in advance. This is sort of an opportunistic thing that happened where we're being offered it for sort of under $10,000. So I'm not sure if sculpture, yes, other things that would be permanent or not permanent, obviously a process to consider. I don't think sculpture this is not likely to happen again anytime soon.
Bob, let me just suggest, in deference to Julie and some of our residents who would like to, see us
Express
consider
themselves.
a little bit more, we'll put this off to the October meeting, okay? But we will make a decision at the October meeting. There will be a resolution to vote it up or down to make it a permanent installation. And in the meantime, the commissioners can discuss among themselves, and everybody is free to email us at our town addresses and city addresses to express their opinion. But as I say, my overall arching view is, and I think everybody's is, art in the park is good. The question is, which art? And is it going to be, what's going to be permanent, what's not going to be permanent? I can see that the one that was proposed tonight, it's not going to be a permanent installation. And maybe at one time we'll have 2 or 3 pieces, and maybe another time we won't have any pieces. But I think we need to encourage artists to come to the park and to exhibit here, because it's a beautiful setting, and their art will get the views that I think they would like that art to have. All right? And with that, thank you, Bob. And
So if I can just add one thing, if anyone is going to email us, I would love to hear what factors we should take into consideration and just in helping us think about it. Because I think if the labyrinth hadn't happened, I might not have said what I said, but it is really 2 permanent structures in a short period of time. And I think they're both terrific. I'm thrilled that they're there. But is there more of a process? Because you're right, people can show up and be like, we want to do this, and it's a great idea, but
well, that's why we also, we discuss things. That's why
I don't
we
know what the
discuss it
answer is
up
on
here,
process,
and we
but-
listen to everybody.
So on our website, there's a link for registering comments, anything you care to say at the Rye Town Park, the Town of Rye website. You go to the Rye Town Park page, and there is a link to send your comments, nice and easy.
We need to move along. As I say, we have a town meeting right after this, which is already 15 minutes late. Do we have any additional comments, public comment on any non-agenda items from the public? Seeing none, do we have any additional comments from the commissioners? Seeing none, may I have a motion to adjourn to executive session to discuss some personnel issues and contract negotiations and possible litigation.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. I do not expect this to be more than 15 minutes, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to come back here. Paul has
Deb, you want
Paul's office. Come on. You know, I'm waiting for him to, he already told me. Okay. We're back in session. May I have a motion to reconvene the public session of the Rye Town Park Commission?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Okay. May I have a motion and a second to approve additional stipends to the senior staff as follows. For Kathy Aguilar, $2,500. For Luke Lockenberg, $2,500. For Bill Lawyer, $1,000. And we will have a budget amendment at the end of the year. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Killian,
Yes.
Commissioner Falanka,
Yes.
Commissioner Rosenberg,
Yes.
President Zuckerman.
Yes, and before I take a motion to adjourn, I would like to wish everybody who observes a Happy New Year and an easy fast for those of you who fast. Now, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Spencer.
Thank you, Fritz.